officially open the meeting for the April 27, 2020 Select Board. Welcome anybody who is listening or anybody who will be joining us via Zoom to comment or ask a question. If you don't know how to join us by Zoom, you can find that on the website if you're able to access a computer while watching us on television. Pardon me. Yes, we're still operating on an emergency basis, and I will mention that tomorrow the governor should be talking about whether she is extending stay-at-home rules and so on and so forth. So I thought we might know that tonight, but we'll probably know that tomorrow. So we'll start with the minutes for the Select Board of April 13th, 2020.
I would make a motion to approve the minutes for as amended and distributed today of April 13th, 2020.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to accept those minutes as presented today. And they just had minor updates of clarification from the packet, right?
Correct.
Correct. Okay. Thank you. Any discussion? I'll call a roll. Whitson?
Yes.
Sammons?
Yes.
Price?
Yes.
Burgoyne is a yes, and Mr. Eno will probably be joining us in progress later. Warrants 45 and 46. Chris?
45 is the accounts payable warrant. It was $19,786.71. A and B were state fees, $310, and payroll was $15,115.69 for a total of $34,902.40.
Thank you. Were there any comments or things you want to point out, Chris, or any questions for Chris on those warrants?
We did have a couple charges. We bought more video equipment for the working at home.
Mm-hmm.
We have some legal fees with our town attorney, and they were part of the Batar case and the warrant. And what else did you say, Eric? The
bond counsel. I'm not sure if you mentioned that.
okay.
Yeah. And so just to be clear, bond counsels, we pay the attorneys to help us with the document preparation and filing for that sale of bonds through the bond bank. So it's whenever we do borrow, we have that expense.
So, great. Are there any other questions? We'll move on then to communications, Select Board communications. Any members of the board have anything they would like to share?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I just
Please.
want to point out that we are, this is actually a continuation of a request that Catherine gave me last meeting. And it is about Heritage Days. Eric and I have been talking back and forth. Chris and I have been having some discussions. And at this point, I am comfortable telling everyone and this board that there will be a celebration for Heritage Days. That is going to happen. What exactly that celebration entails or what it includes as a celebration of our town, we are still trying to figure out. So we want everyone to know that we will still be celebrating our town. We will be celebrating the 200th birthday of Maine through those Heritage Days, but what exactly they will look like, we are still trying to figure out. So we'll have more information on that as we continue to navigate this time.
And I'm assuming, Dennis, you're open to suggestions if any towns people have some ideas of how to do that.
Yes, and I'll be honest with you, you know, to have this conversation, we have had great discussions about fireworks. and about different ideas about fireworks. And you know, any other year I would have said, hey, listen, let's save the money. But it seems like fireworks right now are probably the best way to enjoy something at a social distance.
Yeah.
So irony is not lost on us, first of all. But we do think that there still needs to be some kind of celebration because we think that it's worth it. So we'll figure out that and let everyone else know.
Great. Anybody else?
Yes. I'd just like to mention that the Solid Waste and Recycling Committee met again this week, and things are going really well at the transfer station. The town manager, as the manager of the transfer station, has been doing an exceptional job. Not to mention the fact that the employees there are just rising to every challenge that's presented to them. All 3 towns reported comments from their general public saying that they appreciate the operations, and I think that things are going really well.
Good. Thank you, Catherine. Chris, anything?
No, I'm good.
I'm good too. We'll move on to public communications. I don't know if we have any members of the public who would like to speak to us.
I think we just have,
I think it's just Bill right now and people who may be watching us on a television station.
right, and Kristen is there to do our minutes.
Right. Okay. I will say if there's a question as we proceed with hello, Ralph,
Yay!
we'll let him connect via audio. Ralph, I see you. You just need to unmute.
You're muted, Ralph.
How's that?
Okay.
Yay!
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
So we're in process, Ralph. We just we're talking about public communication and wrapping that up, but we did our select board communications. It's just some quick little announcements and so forth. Did you have anything you wanted to add tonight?
No, I'm just glad to be here.
We're very glad you're here too. Good. We'll move on to business, old business. And the first piece of the old business is to conduct a final reading of the marijuana establishments ordinance. And so basically the story on this is we did the second reading. So we're ready to report that out, but it was going out pending, when we did that reading, it was pending, legal review. So the legal review did come back with some language that looks like it's clarifying and some of it's additional, it looks like to me. So I wanted to make sure that we're all set with that. We can send it out without the legal advice. I don't know if I would advise us to do that, but we should discuss starting, if you have the marijuana establishments ordinance, and it's just the overriding ordinance. That's the item here, right?
That's right, yeah.
Okay. So on page 3 of that, there's some additional language on people not holding more than 3 licenses. Is there any comment or question or observations on that people would like to discuss?
Well, I'm just curious as to why they'd be allowed to hold more than 1 unless somebody wants to try to corner the market. Why 3 as opposed to 2 or just 1?
I'm not sure.
Do people get a separate license for cultivation versus having a storefront? Is that how you could have more than 1 license?
This is 3 licenses for adult use or marijuana cultivation facilities or a combined plant canopy in excess of 30,000 feet. So that gives...
Oh, darn it.
You're still there, Ralph.
Yeah, I think he's on his way out, though. He had the same failure last time.
Well, how I'm reading this is that we had the 3 in there. They just kind of switched the order of what's in the sentence.
Is that correct?
Well, there is an expansion of it and clarification about what that meant. The 50% share, basically this was intended to address in part the issue that we had last year with one person running a large facility. They could run several like that. The idea is that if you cap the number of licenses, you can regulate the canopy size so that you don't have somebody, kind of like what Ralph suggested, coming in and having multiple operations under one license.
And I think it probably ought to be tweaked a little bit more that specifies you could hold different licenses depending on the class of that license, but perhaps no more than one of each particular kind.
Well, this is just for cultivation.
Okay.
So
this is only for cultivation. So it's just in that area.
It's just adult use and medical cultivation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other comments or observations?
So the idea is that you can't have 6 different growing facilities. I, as a person, couldn't apply to have 6 different growing facilities in our one town.
Yeah, and very much also shelter some of those under an LLC, for example. Say you had, Woodsom's Horticultural Products LLC. That might be a way to, without this regulation or this restriction, operate 6 or 7 different entities. So it tries to address that issue.
So we're looking to keep this as small business rather than a large corporate kind of takeover.
Yes, yeah, that's the idea.
Gotcha, Dennis.
Well, and I think additionally, the other thing to think about is the scope of the entire ordinance is that while this licensure clarification is now in this language, all the other regulations still needs to be met. All the planning board review still needs to be met. All the fees still need to be paid, and so forth. So my question to the board then is, do we want to accept the language as presented to change that would go to voters?
Yes, but should we look at page 4 first?
I was willing to take these each separately, but we can go to 4 first. And I think 4 is just a very simple clarification because I think instead of locking safe and, some of this storage is larger than the safe. So they had a secure case room, a room with a deadbolt and padlock or whatever, and a key code. So I think it was just more a recognition that a facility would probably need more than they're not going to get a bank-size walk-in safe, at 8 tons or something, more like a gun case perhaps,
Right. I would make a motion that I'm trying to get back to the title, that we accept as a third reading the Town of Readfield Marijuana Establishments Ordinance as presented in the packet.
Second.
And so the clarification on that, I'm not clarifying, your motion is good. So I'm just observing for public that that motion is, for the third reading, is recognizing the legal review and including the legal review's language. So that's what we're doing. Is there discussion on that motion? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Eno?
Yes.
Price?
Yes.
Sammons?
Yes.
Woodson?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. I'm trying to do the alphabet a little different than I did last time, as you probably noticed. So everybody's not always the last or the first. Good. So we've dispensed with that particular item. So now we're going to consider the final draft of the FY21 budget and warrant. So in your packet, you have the warrant, and there was a correction made. So there was an update that went out, and that was to Article 36 that had the 25% in it, and instead that is $200,000. So Catherine, thank you for catching that on your careful read of things. So is there any discussion on putting forward the warrant and with the articles so developed and ready at this point?
I would just like a little discussion on the meeting place and time, just more for the public, so we're all informed as to why we've changed.
Yes, the election, if you will, by secret ballot will be on July 14th, and the July 14th date is by the governor ordered the primary to be held on July 14th, and towns were given the option. Well, I guess towns are taking the option is the better way to put it, and we have already voted on this as a board to do that on the same day. The reason the governor did that was because she wasn't sure of where social distancing and other things of that nature would be in June on the 9th. And so we're concurring with that as being a good idea to follow that same protocol.
And why are we using the elementary school and not the town office?
I can answer that. We're looking to use that because it will give us 3 times the space. Social distancing is still going to be very important even in July, we believe, and it seems to be the direction everybody's heading in. So in order for us to do that, we needed to have more space. We'd be folded right up on top of each other with a 6-foot spacing in the upstairs of Guile Hall. So the reason for the change in location is social distancing, and we do have a notice that I'm hoping the board can vote to authorize or vote to sign, however you'd like to, in addition to the authorization or the vote to move forward with that final warrant language. Maybe you could take them together, I don't know. But having that as a separate notice that will get posted would be very helpful for us in helping to notify the public about these changes.
That sounds...
Is that separate notice in the packet?
Yes.
It's the first page just before the meeting ballot.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see. Yeah, I would think we would take all of that together in a package. I'm not sure, but it's up to the board.
I have a question. May I?
Yes.
We have always, okay, let's see. Since we started secret ballot, I believe we've always had absentee balloting. And to do that, people, do they need to come to the town office? Can they email? Can they call? How do we do that? Because that seems to be one of the concerns in the general public across the nation. And we already have that process in place, so we just need to make sure that people know how to utilize it and what the deadlines would be.
Yeah, my plan was to discuss that actually under 2110, which is the new business for tonight, which, by the way, on your agenda, it says old business twice.
Well, I'll wait until then. Thank you very much.
Does that sound good? Because I have some of the same questions.
Well, so nothing else changed in the warrant, correct?
No.
Then I would make a motion to accept the notice of postponement of secret ballot election and referendum, and to accept the annual town meeting warrant secret ballot, both as presented in tonight's packet.
Second?
Been moved and seconded to approve the municipal notice of the postponement of the secret ballot election and referendum, and to present the annual town meeting warrant and secret ballot as presented in the packet. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, Mr. Eno?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Ms. Sammons?
Yeah.
Ms. Woodson?
Yes.
And Ms. Burgoyne is a yes. Thank you. So now we'll move on to Can I just reopen that last one just for one more observation? We're good on the motion and so on and so forth. I was wondering, I did want to mention that the Miranda Cook RSU 38 is also planning to have their vote on July 14th. They're a little different in the sense that all 4 towns had to agree to that, and I believe all 4 towns have agreed at this point. And I did talk to a board member tonight about that, just to verify that. So that will also take place as well on that date. Eric, did you get any official, you have probably not gotten any official notice from the school board yet as to where their budget's at?
We have not.
Okay, so I can recap where they are now. They have not voted on their final budget, okay? But if we take a look at the division of education, we had $3,821,000 and 706. Well, $3,821,706 million dollars, for a increase of 111,000 some odd dollars. They're working now with a budget that's $3 million. This is for Readfield only. $3,691,653, which would be a decrease from last year of 0.5%, or a decrease of 18,700. So it looks to me, doing the math here, that we're going to be $130,000 less in terms of education. So they've hit the mark that we asked them to be considerate of, I think. Basically, we have a decline in our budget.
That's remarkable.
Yes.
That must have taken a tremendous amount of effort on a lot of people's parts.
It did. Some of it is in revenue. I will say that it's in state anticipated revenue, and some of it's in rollover, because obviously bus routes aren't running, so they're not spending any money on gas. And so there are some things like that they are rolling that money over. So, but I will say that a lot of hard work happened on the principals and the RSU leadership, I think, in terms of getting us to this point. So they've done a very good job. I wanted to share that I had that information. And so at least in our calculations, or preliminary calculations of mill rate and so forth, you can use that $3,691,653 now, and I can send that to you, Eric.
That would be excellent. Yeah, no, it's an extraordinary feat for them to get down to that level.
And, you know, the budget, I did talk to a board member representing Readfield tonight. They haven't voted. They're still looking and see if there's some other savings available, but probably there wouldn't be anything too much more significant. They've probably gone where they can go. But that's where they're at. So,
Well,
great.
and a lot may depend on what happens at the state level and what cuts the state has to enact across the entire state budget.
And so Catherine's observation is very good. No matter what we do, or the RSU does, or even the state to some extent, because of the feds and so forth, there could always be a different reckoning at some point during the year, but we'll just deal with it. That's what we're trying to do. So now we'll move on to discussing the process and options for communicating the budget, warrant, and secret ballot information in the current environment. So why don't you start off with your question, Catherine, which was about absentee balloting.
Right, I had to unmute, sorry.
No, it's quite low.
I know that we have absentee balloting here in Readfield. We have for years. So my question is, can we reiterate how it is that people can request an absentee ballot, how it's returned, how it's accounted for, so people understand the security that's involved that has always been there and will continue to be, and how we might get that information out to our public.
Yeah, one of the thoughts I've had is that we want to do a complete mailing prior to the budget, which we would do. I think in the past, we've, in some instances, published in the advertiser the warrant with questions and so on and so forth. So Eric is looking at more of a mailer that we would do. I think we're talking about 6 to 8 pages of a mailer, which would be a 8.5 by 11, 6 pages or 8 pages mailer, and we're getting a quote on that. And so that would go to everyone, and I would think that there would be right on the front page that kind of information. I really want to make sure our absentee process is very robust, because I want to actually encourage people to vote absentee, even if it's just a week out. I'd like to see as much early voting as possible to try to not only make sure that, you know, people can physically distance that day, but also poll workers are simply dealing with a sheer lesser number of people. Does that make sense? Is that kind of what do people think about that? Okay.
The more you
So Eric, when do we have to? Excuse me, Ralph. Did you say something?
I'm just saying, I think the more you can do by mail for all the circumstances you outlined, the better off we are going to be.
Yeah. We're not going to be able to, I don't think we can mail in ballots. I think they actually have to come to
You
us.
have to mail them in. You cannot, you can't drop them off in the chute. You have to either bring it in and hand it or mail it, right, Eric?
Yeah, you can drop it off in the box, or mail it in, or put it in person. So I think all 3 of those are acceptable.
You can't put it in the box, though.
I thought there was the mechanism for that, but maybe that might have been something that has changed from Robin to Deb. Kristen could probably answer that better if she's able to unmute.
My mother had to do another one last year because I put it in the box for her.
Okay, so that was probably the chain of custody question. I'll check with Kristen on that, or Deb, excuse me. But I think I've seen it done both ways. So, but what we will do is make sure we have definitive information available broadly and in multiple formats, as Bruce has suggested. I think that you know, we'll be having something in the messenger. We'll be having things on our website. We'll do direct mail. We'll do Facebook. Dennis had a wonderful suggestion, not so much about absentee balloting, but I think it could be a part of it, of doing maybe some short YouTube videos or Facebook videos to promote various highlights of the budget, or even just go through all the individual articles and do a short explanation, much as we do with the written explanation.
And again, I want to make sure that the board, this select board, is going to be, I want us to sort of approve the process of absentee voting. There is a process that's put into place, but I want to make sure that this board weighs in on exactly how we're going to promote that and how we're going to encourage that, and, you know, to be extremely specific and have all the questions at the board level asked about how absentee ballots are presented and handled. Ralph?
I'm a little bit concerned about the mail-in portion, if we can do it, given a Supreme Court ruling about postmarking that I don't understand, and I'm not sure it comes to play in Maine, but it may have some bearing on timing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, and again, that comes back to giving that guidance, I think, on whatever communication we give out. And it can be guidance that says, hey, here's when your postmark is, but boy, we really recommend that you do this at least 7 days out, you know, for example. I mean, we can make recommendations for the best practices to go forward. What we can't do is tell people how to vote. Well, actually, kind of do, actually, with the warrant, but because we propose it. But if you know what I mean, you know, we can try to guide people to the most useful situation for absentee voting.
I think what you said is great, Bruce, and maybe where we could start with that, since Deb is in charge of voting as the town clerk, if she could put together her suggested sheet for what would be on that front page, how to absentee vote,
Mhm.
then we could look at that and approve it.
Mhm.
And I think we're all in agreement just by head nods that we all want to encourage people to do what is most comfortable for them and is the safest for our town employees.
Yeah. I love going to the polls. It's something I've always done. I'm going to vote absentee because I think that's the right thing to do. So the other thing I wanted to talk about was the public meeting and hearing that's scheduled for May 7th. I'm looking at the timing of the July 14th meeting and thinking that this is too early. I really would like to do that hearing later on to mesh better with the absentee situation so that people are informed. And how many days before the election generally, Eric, do you know? And I'm sorry if I'm asking you something you don't know, but how many days before the election do we actually make ballots available?
Ballots should be made available at least 30 days in advance, and typically we want to have them, in order to comply with state law, in the hands of the clerk for a final draft 60 days in advance of the meeting.
So 60 days in advance of the meeting puts us back around when? Puts us around May 15th or so.
Yeah, mid-May, yeah. Yep. But
So,
that's just for the, I mean, what we've done tonight essentially puts everything before the clerk that needs to be before the clerk. The requirements for public hearing are a little bit different, but I believe we have to have the public hearing at least 10 days in advance, no less than 10 days in advance. So I can double check that, but I know that if we did that hearing sometime in,
June.
late May or June, we'd be fine.
It says right on our sheet, on your budget schedule sheet, that it
Yep.
has to be 10 days, although this year
there we
it'll
go.
be 11
Yeah.
because the 10th day is a Saturday.
Yep.
So it
So
has
anything
to be the
before
3rd of
that.
July.
Yeah.
And I'm a little concerned, and I'm glad you've brought this up, whoever did this, because we didn't have our first public budget meeting hearing where we usually take input from people, although as I was thinking of that, we have every select board meeting where people are welcome to attend and all the budget committee meetings. But I still feel bad that that didn't happen. So I'd like to do this not just 10 days before, but maybe 3 weeks before. I don't know.
3 weeks before.
The election.
Yeah, well, I guess my thinking is to do it sometime in June, probably around the time that we would normally vote. I probably don't want to do it. I don't want to do it when people might actually be thinking of going on vacation. In other words, the last week in June to me
Right.
Is probably where people might be thinking of. First of all, even though they're out of school now, they're probably thinking of getting out of the house if they possibly can.
Yep.
I'm kind of hearing that a little bit. So I think if we were able to try to do it in the first couple of weeks of June, maybe towards mid-June, it would make sense. The thing I was talking about with the 30 days and wanting to know about that is I really hope that we have the state ballots ready and the Maranacook ballots ready, so everything's kind of in one absentee package so everybody can vote on everything. It's sort of like this extra time is a gift, so let's use it to line things up really well.
I will say a lot of that depends on the RSU and how good they are about getting that information to us promptly. And hopefully we can get that more timely than we usually do. But in the past, it's been a real struggle to get that information in a way that makes it easy for us to do absentee. But I can certainly up my communication with them, and I know Deb will do the same to try to make sure that we have all of that ready as soon as possible.
Yeah, well, they are making one more pass at the budget, but I can't imagine that they're going to be going way past the middle of May. So is there any question or any thought about us exploring a date that would be in June for the public hearing? The other thing I'm thinking of is I don't think social distancing will be completely off at that time, but we may be able to spend some more time to figure out how to do even a better presentation and to get better involvement. We did have the public meeting for public comment and recommendations on the draft budget, but there were just one or two people there. And that was when Andy and I and Eric were sitting in one room. The rest of you were Zooming in.
That's right.
So there was that hearing, and it was recorded, but it's not. It wasn't at a participation level that I can just go around saying, well, I really feel good about that. So what I'd like to do is be able to say about this next one, I do feel good about that. That's my goal.
What if we use the original election date of
Yeah.
June 9th? It's a
I'm
date,
good with that.
it's kind of a familiar date to people who are involved.
Eric, do you see any obstacles to doing it that way?
I don't. I don't. We want to double check with the budget committee, but I'm sure people availability is so different now than it used to be. Whatever you propose, we'll have to check. So I think that's fine. It's a familiar date. It'll work for people.
Let's just call it June 9th as a preliminary reschedule.
And I have a question on the ballot. Eric, do we print the school referendum ballot to have available, or does the school print it and bring it to each of the towns?
My understanding, again, I don't have the full answer, but what I've seen is that those are provided by the school. It's one reason why we have so much, have had in the past, trouble with availability. But so the school provides it by my understanding.
Because I agree with Bruce, it would be great if that was included at the same time we sent out the other absentee ballots. So on the day one, we had it all together.
Yeah, well, it'd be great to have it all available by mid-June. Absolutely.
And along with you, Eric, I mean, I'm more than willing. I've upped my communication with the RSU. And so I'm more than happy to just talk about with them those concerns.
That'd be great. I appreciate it.
Okay, great.
I'm kind of remembering 45 days out as a time period that I've heard in the past that's when we send out absentee ballots. So,
You mean make them available?
yes,
So that's around June 1st is what we're talking about there.
that would be about right, yeah.
Yeah.
They do come out before we have that last public meeting.
Right.
Yeah. And I guess that's a question too, is would you rather have that public hearing just before the ballots go out, or would you rather have it in the middle? I mean, you'd have ballots out for 9 days if you had it on the 9th. If you had it on, say, May 27th, for example, I have no idea what day that is. I just pulled it out of my hat. But if you had it the last week in May, you would be following it up with the ballots. So you kind of have a progression of getting the information and then getting the ballot.
Well, the 26th would be a Tuesday. And that's the day after Memorial Day because it's early this year.
Well, I think we can do those on any night. I think we've done them on Thursdays too.
Yep.
So the idea of doing it perhaps on May 28th could work as well.
I'll add that the 30 days in advance is I think that's the minimum that they have to be available. I'll check with Deb on that as well, but I think her intention and ours certainly is to make them available as soon as possible, as soon as they're ready.
Yeah, but I really would like to make sure, I know that that's something we want to do, but I really want to make sure that we try to progress through the election process in such a way that it is very helpful to voters in terms of getting explanations and then getting the ballots. So I wouldn't want to just send out ballots real early just because we can't do it, and to check that off. And I'm not saying that's what Deb wants to do. I'm just saying I'd rather make sure, I'm not trying to shorten the period of time or anything like that. I'm just trying to mesh things very well for voters.
When do you think that mail is going out with all the information?
That's the key.
Well, I think we would try to get that out about a week in advance of whatever that hearing is. Would that make sense?
That's what we got to do. We got to find out when the mailer is going out and then plan the meetings after that's been
That
delivered.
can go out anytime, really. I mean, we're in the process of preparing that. I think Bruce and Dennis both have an interest in looking at it. The fact that we're sending out a full mailer, typically we don't have an explanation on all the articles, but we may want to. But we need to look at that more. But I would think that we could certainly have that ready, in the next week or two, and have it mailed out, as you're suggesting, a week or so before before the hearing on the 9th.
Well, we also were kind of discussing whether to have that hearing perhaps on May 28th. Any thoughts on that?
Quick questions. It's like a chicken and egg scenario here, because if I understand the process correctly, regardless of the timing, earlier or a little bit later, there won't be, regardless of public input, there's not going to be an opportunity to make changes in the ballot language. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct, because when we went to a secret ballot process, we gave up town meeting.
So you're going to have public input, which may help you gauge sentiment on what a vote outcome might be, but you can't change the language in a particular warrant question to reflect what you might feel is some overwhelming shift in public sentiment. So my feeling would be that it might be more beneficial in terms of generating public comment for people to actually have the ballot in hand so that they know what they're actually going to be voting on, instead of commenting on a document that they don't have physically in their possession.
Yeah, well, the mailing is essentially the ballot with explanations. It's the warrant that's getting mailed to you. So it doesn't have the bubbles.
Right, and the whole purpose of this second meeting that we have is not to solicit feedback. It's to provide information of clarity so that people understand what they're voting up or down on.
And it's also providing the public with somebody who can say, I really don't like that article at all, please vote it down. Or I really think that that's a key thing that we need to do. I'm urging people support it. So that's the citizen comment that can come from that meeting.
That being the case, I would think that the earlier date would be better in terms of giving the public time to respond what they're going to be considering and going to the polls about.
So if I may, and the concept here would be to have the mailer go out around the middle of May, followed within a week or 10 days, let's say, by the public hearing meeting, followed by around June 1st, the ballot being available. And us having a complete month plus a couple of weeks to get people voting.
Do you need a motion for that, or are we just?
I don't
gonna
think I do. I think I just need the sense of the board. And if everybody's good on that, we'll work on that, and we'll get that schedule put together and go forward on that basis. Eric, do you think that's helpful?
Yeah, it certainly gives us a clear path, and I think it's doable. It gives us about 3 weeks to get that explanation document wrapped up and sent off to a printer, which I think it shouldn't take very long at all.
I don't think so. Okay, great. Any other questions or comments about communicating the budget, the warrant, or the secret ballot information in the current environment? Okay, well, thank you for that fairly good discussion on that. Can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
Dennis?
I move to adjourn.
I'll second.
Oh.
I moved and seconded to adjourn. Did the town manager want to interrupt that motion and say
I
something?
don't know if I do or not. We had a discussion earlier about the possibility of having a candidates night. Were we gonna talk about that?
Sorry.
I don't want to open the can of worms, but yeah.
My notes to myself were incomplete. I just had CAN, and I didn't know what that meant when I wrote out my agenda notes. So it did mean candidates night, and actually in this case it means candidate night, because we do not have anybody who wanted to run for school board positions, which I think is sad. And we have one candidate for select board, that's Mr. Price. So I, in the interest of informing the public, we can certainly do a Zoom session, or we could do just a television.
Well,
I don't know if we could just televise.
Why don't we let Dennis televise why he's running again and what he's doing? I mean, there's no sense in asking him questions.
Oh, come on, I want to throw questions at him.
Dennis put together a program.
We usually have a moderator
yeah.
and questions, so
Yeah.
I agree with Chris. We don't want to go that route.
Yeah, I was going to say, do we need a full production, or do we even need to have the event? I mean, if it's just Dennis giving his pitch, that's pretty much a, campaign ad. I don't know.
No,
I'm
but
open either way.
all the same, we are trying to ensure that we're as informative to voters as possible. So I would say, if there's an opportunity to put a date on the calendar for a Zoom night for questions to come in from the public, I probably wouldn't hire a moderator for that. I could moderate that on an unbiased basis, just basically read questions if there were some, or Eric could do that as town manager. So it can be simple, or we could ask Bill to produce a discussion in one room where it's more of a discussion with just two people or something of that nature. We should obviously do that too, kind of folding that into this whole time schedule. It would be around middle to late May, I would say. Well, I guess that could be before the ballot goes out.
Could we do it prior to the public hearing? So say do
Oh,
one of
you
them
call
at 6
into the
o'clock.
public. That's a good idea, actually.
Do
Yeah.
6 o'clock and the other at 6:30.
I like
That's
that.
a really good idea.
Yeah.
What do you think of that, Dennis? He's good with that. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to bracket it with that, and it'll be a half-hour open question period for Mr. Price, and we'll be good to go. It really is something else when he leans way forward and his entire body disappears, but just Eric's head is floating there. I don't know if he knows that, but that was very strange. So I have a motion on the floor here to adjourn. I'm ready to take a vote on that. I can't do that, right? Mr. Eno?
Yes.
Mr. Price?
Yes.
Ms. Sammons?
Yes.
Ms. Whitsom?
Yes.
Mr. Guenza, yes, thank you so much for participating tonight.
Thank you.
Night all.
Thanks.
Good night,
Good night.
all.
Thanks, good night.